despite a very recent and likely very temporary defeat by the United States Supreme Court, the Republican Party's war against women's health and reproductive rights persists. But finally, Senate Democrats seem prepared to make them pay for it before the election with a series of devastating votes, and a prominent Republican senator was publicly humiliated by a women's health advocate when he attempted to spring a bad faith gotcha on her during a hearing, and we have to talk about it. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, I have several clips to show you, but I actually want to work in reverse order. I want to start with this clip in which women's health advocate Jocelyn Frye was questioned by Republican Senator John Kennedy. And this was a hearing about women's health and reproductive rights, and Democrats are in the majority, so they got to call most of the witnesses. And Kennedy decided to spring a gotcha on the Democratic witnesses. But he hit a brick wall when he went up against Jocelyn Frye, who shut him down in viral fashion, but then proceeded to school him with facts and empathy. It was a masterpiece. Take a look.
Should the mother, at that juncture, have the right, clearly a viable child, to abort the child? My example is not unrealistic.
I think that
if your answer, I'm going to save my time. If your answer is going to be that never happens, let me go to Ms. Frye. What do you think?
Well, Senator, first of all, if you don't ask a question if you don't want to know the answer. And I think 1%, but I'm saying to you, Senator, 1% of abortions happen at 21 weeks or later. Mm-hmm. So I think the premise of your question sets up a conversation about abortion that is unfair. It is rarely is that ever the instance. The vast majority of pregnancies and abortions that are considered late in a pregnancy have to do with severe, devastating medical circumstances. And I understand your point, Senator. I understand your point. But with all due respect, I also think the chances of people sort of getting all the way through a pregnancy and just sort of saying, I don't want it, is disrespectful to women.
That was a brilliant response by Jocelyn Frye. It really was. I mean, she just did multiple things all at once. She shut him down. She went viral doing it. She put him in his place. And then she schooled him on the facts and with empathy. She's like, listen, I understand your point, but this is a fraction of 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 a possibility. And she echoed the sentiment of Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg when he was running for office in 2020 for the presidency against now President Biden, right? He had a viral moment on the Fox Propaganda Network where he was interviewed, and Chris Wallace attempted to spring the same sort of gotcha on him, suggesting that elective third-term abortions are commonplace and that they're done purely for, selfish reasons, or because, 8 months and 2 weeks into the pregnancy, the mother decides out of just pure nefarious purpose or sociopathy to terminate the pregnancy. And Pete Buttigieg also talked about this, and he shut that bad faith argument down, again, I think in very effective fashion. Take a look.
I think the dialogue has got so caught up on where you draw the line that we've gotten away from the fundamental question of who gets to draw the line. And I trust women to draw the line when it's their own life.
So just to be clear, you're saying that you would be okay with a woman well into the third trimester deciding to abort her pregnancy?
Look, these hypotheticals are usually set up in order to provoke a strong emotional...
In fairness, sir, it's not hypothetical. There's 6,000 women a year who get abortions in the third trimester.
That's right, representing less than 1% of cases.
I know, but 6,000 pregnancies.
Let's take ourselves in... Yeah. So let's put ourselves in the shoes of a woman in that situation. If it's that late in your pregnancy, that means almost by definition, you've been expecting to carry it to term. We're talking about women who have perhaps chosen a name, women who have purchased a crib, families that then get the most devastating medical news of their lifetime, something about the health or the life of the mother that forces them to make an impossible, unthinkable choice. And the bottom line is, as horrible as that choice is, that woman, that family may seek spiritual guidance, they may seek medical guidance, but that decision's not going to be made any better, medically or morally, because the government is dictating how that decision should be made.
As was the case with Jocelyn Fry, that was a masterclass answer by Secretary Pete Buttigieg. And again, I'll remind everybody that what the Democratic Party wants, including Bernie Sanders and AOC, some of the most progressive elements of the Democratic Party, they want to codify Roe v. Wade protections. That's it. And Roe v. Wade did not mandate or even permit, elective third-term abortions all the way up till the day of pregnancy. What it allowed for, elective first-term abortions, second-term abortions, the state could impose certain restrictions on it. And then third trimester abortions, it could be mandated by the state that those were forbidden unless medical emergency. So it was a staggered graduating class with increasing level of requirements and regulations. Nobody is advocating for, again, unrestricted abortion, not within the Democratic Party. And again, even the premise, this idea that it's commonplace, as Secretary Buttigieg and Jocelyn Fry point out, it assumes that there are women out there who carry a pregnancy to term, go through all of the emotional and physical pain and discomfort associated with a pregnancy, the weight gain, the discomfort, the frequent urination, the back pain, et cetera, so forth, that they take it all the way and then nefariously and sociopathically, for no reason whatsoever other than pure malice, decide to terminate the pregnancy. And that not only does this happen, it happens to a statistically significant degree that the government should be cracking down on abortion and actually going in the opposite direction. I mean, my God, think of all the other cases that we've talked about in previous videos, like in Texas, Kate Cox, a woman who wanted to have a child, tried to have a child, and then her doctor told her that this child had a fatal illness and that if she carried it to term, not only would it die an agonizing death, but it would also affect her health and it may render her sterile, that she would not be able to have kids in the future. So she sought an injunction in Texas. A court granted it. And then the Texas Attorney General, Ken Paxton, said, I will prosecute the physician who performs this abortion, even though it was court permitted, or anyone else who facilitates it if it goes through. A conflict between the executive branch of the state and the court of the state. And then the Supreme Court eventually overturned the court order, and they wanted Kate Cox to carry this fetus to term, this non-viable fetus to term, even at great personal medical risk to herself. That is what they mandate. So that's the premise here, that these, third-term sociopathic elective abortions, nothing motivated by nothing but pure malice, are so significant that we actually have to go where Texas is going. Absolutely insane, despicable stuff coming from the Republican Party. Now, I mentioned in the beginning of this video that there was a very recent, but likely very temporary defeat of the Republicans at the hands of the United States Supreme Court. As the Washington Post points out, the Supreme Court upholds broad access to key abortion pill mifepristone. We won't go into the details, but suffice it to say that, again, a Trump-appointed Republican lunatic federal judge tried to impose a nationwide ban on mifepristone, and the Supreme Court of the United States unanimously threw it out. However, we have reason to be suspicious about what this means, because some people say, see, look, even the far-right Supreme Court, they are so eager to protect women's reproductive rights and women's health. Not so fast, says Professor Murray of Strict Scrutiny, a constitutional law professor. And she makes the case that this may return before the right-wing United States Supreme Court. And when it does, it may very well have a different outcome.
And with us now, Melissa Murray, MSNBC legal analyst. Melissa, how surprised are you that this was a unanimous decision and that the decision was written by Brett Kavanaugh?
Not really surprised. On our podcast, Strict Scrutiny, we said that the court would dismiss this on jurisdictional grounds, and they did, standing. They've been really focused on trying to get out some unanimous opinions. I think that feeds the narrative that this is a more consensus-driven court than a conservative extremist court, and I think this sort of feeds into that. But I want to emphasize that this is not a sweeping victory. It does preserve access to medication abortion for now, but this is not a decision on the merits. This does not credit the FDA's approval of mifepristone. It simply says that these are not the right plaintiffs to bring this case, and the anti-abortion movement is going to find the right plaintiffs.
So there you have it. It is a victory and it should be celebrated as such, but it is not the end of the war. This is not the United States Supreme Court signaling to Republicans that they have overstepped and they're going far beyond their remit. It's simply saying, hey, on pure procedural grounds, we have to throw this case out. So it's an invitation for them to try and try and try again. And as Professor Murray points out, They very likely will. And we have no reason to give this far-right, ridiculous Supreme Court the benefit of the doubt. I have no reason to believe that they won't uphold a nationwide ban on mifepristone if you give them the right procedural necessities to do so. I'll also point out the progressive commentator, Elie Mystal. He gave a shout out to Solicitor General Elizabeth Berloger, who is one of the best rhetoricians and debaters I've ever seen. And she defended this case successfully in front of the court. He says, I would like to once again heap praise on Solicitor General Elizabeth Berloger, who expertly argued the mifepristone case and somehow avoided climbing up on the bench and garroting Samuel Alito with an umbilical cord after his umpteenth stupid hypothetical. Solicitor General Berloger is a phenomenal rhetorician and debater, and it really is a joy to hear her in oral arguments because she's so good at what she does. I also said that Democrats are prepared to make Republicans pay a political price, which is good because Democrats need to start behaving ruthlessly when it comes to politics, especially because this isn't unethical at all. So they're going to throw a couple of votes at the Republicans and force them to go on the record. And one of them is in defense of in vitro fertilization. So Sahil Kapoor points out all 49 Senate Republicans have signed onto a statement today saying they support IVF. This comes ahead of a Senate vote today on a Democratic-led bill codifying protections for IVF and assisted reproductive technology, which GOP senators are expected to block. So they're expected to block this, let alone vote for it, right? They're not going to vote for it. They're going to block this from coming to the floor. But they also want you to know it's not because they oppose the contents of the bill. Hey, this IVF bill, this pro-IVF bill, it's going to come to the floor. We're not going to let it come to the floor because we don't want to vote for it. But also, we totally support it. Like, totally. They say Senate Democrats have embraced a summer of scare tactics, a partisan campaign of false fear-mongering intended to mislead and confuse the American people. In vitro fertilization is legal and available in every state across our nation. We strongly support continued nationwide access to IVF, which has allowed millions of aspiring parents to start and grow their families. The problem is we have seen in red states in particular, overeager, highly conservative state Supreme Courts attempt to block IVF. So there is a rational predicate to what the Democrats are attempting here, which is saying, okay, listen, if you support it, then you should go on the record and codify it, enshrine it into federal law, which would prevent rogue far-right courts from attempting to block it in red states. So we'll see what happens at the time of recording. This vote has not yet come to pass. Perhaps Republicans will have a change of heart or at least understand the political consequences that they face if they oppose this bill. And Democrats have an obligation, if Republicans block it or if they vote against it in droves, to make them pay for it at the ballot box. These facts and these votes don't speak for themselves. They need to be shouted out from rooftops to the American people. Let me know what you think in the comments.